While the father is away, two innocent twins are forced by their cruel stepmother to wash 50 pots until their hands hurt. But everything changes when the millionaire father arrives unexpectedly and finds his daughters asleep on the floor, covered in soap and tears. What he did to the stepmother will shock you. The kitchen of the luxurious Montgomery estate in Westport, Connecticut, reeked of soap and grease. 12-year-old identical twins, Lily and Emma, scrubbed enormous pots until their small hands turned red and raw. The younger by minutes, Emma, sniffled quietly, while her sister Lily maintained a stoic expression, determined not to give their stepmother the satisfaction of seeing her break. "I don't see my reflection in those yet," Victoria said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes cold as she inspected the girls' work. 50 pots, not 49, not when they're still greasy. 50 spotless pots before you sleep. Victoria Sheffield Montgomery, their father's new wife of only 3 months, was the picture of elegance when William was home. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, and a warm smile that never quite reached her eyes. But when William left on business trips, which happened with increasing frequency, Victoria transformed into someone unrecognizable. "But it's our birthday," Emma whispered, immediately regretting her words when Victoria's perfectly manicured nails dug into her shoulder. "Your birthday is exactly why you need to learn gratitude," Victoria hissed. "Living in this mansion enjoying luxuries most children could never imagine. Character is built through hard work, not entitlement." When Victoria finally left them alone, Lily pulled her sister close. "Dad will be home tomorrow. He promised, remember? He never misses our birthday." "He missed last year," Emma reminded her, her voice small in the cavernous kitchen. "That was different. There was that emergency in Tokyo. But this year, he promised something special." Martha Wilson, the housekeeper who had raised the girls since their mother's passing during childbirth, peered into the kitchen after Victoria had retired to the master suite. The 60-year-old woman's kind face crumpled at the sight of the exhausted children. "Oh, my sweet girls," she whispered, quickly entering and rolling up her sleeves. "Let me help you finish these." "She'll know," Lily warned. "She always knows." "Then I'll just keep you company," Martha said, sitting on a stool nearby. Began humming softly, the same lullaby she'd sung to them as babies, a wordless comfort in the sterile kitchen. Hours later, the twins curled up together on the kitchen floor, too exhausted to climb the grand staircase to their bedroom. Martha draped a blanket over them, her heart breaking at the sight of their raw hands and tear-stained faces. The Montgomery twins, heirs to one of the largest financial empires in the Northeast, sleeping on cold tiles like servants. William Montgomery's life had become a perpetual cycle of airports, conference rooms, and hotel suites since the loss of his beloved wife Elizabeth. Building his wealth had become both escape and penance. The more successful his investment firm became, the further he drifted from the 2 little girls who reminded him painfully of what he'd lost. When Victoria entered his life at a charity gala, introduced by his own sister Diane, she seemed the answer to his prayers. Sophisticated, charming, and seemingly devoted to his daughters, she filled a void in his lonely existence, the whirlwind. Romance and quick marriage had raised eyebrows, but William was beyond caring about society's opinions. At 3 a.m., the grand front door of the mansion opened quietly. William Montgomery, still in his tailored suit despite the late hour, entered carrying 2 identical gift boxes and a bouquet of pink roses, the twins' favorite. His flight from London had landed early, and he'd driven straight home, eager to surprise his daughters on their special day. The house was silent, save for the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer. William frowned at the stillness. Normally, Martha left a light on when he was expected. Placing the gifts on the entryway table, he wandered toward the kitchen, drawn by the faint scent of industrial cleaner. The sight that greeted him froze his blood. His precious daughters, still in their school uniforms, huddled together on the kitchen floor, surrounded by stacks of gleaming pots. Their hands were bandaged with kitchen towels, spots of red seeping through the cloth. "What in God's name?" he whispered, kneeling beside them. The movement woke Lily, always the lighter sleeper. Her eyes widened in momentary fear before recognition dawned. "Daddy, You're early." "What happened here?" William asked, his voice tight with controlled fury as he gently examined their hands. Before Lily could answer, Victoria appeared in the doorway, her silk robe cinched tightly at the waist, hair and makeup still inexplicably perfect at this hour. "William, what a wonderful surprise," she exclaimed, her smile faltering as she took in the scene. "The girls wanted to help prepare for their birthday celebration. I told them it wasn't necessary, but they insisted. You know how headstrong they can be." The twins exchanged a look that communicated volumes, a silent language developed over years of shared experiences. It was Emma who broke first, tears welling in her eyes as she looked from her father to Victoria. "That's not true," she whispered. William's gaze hardened as he looked from his daughter's injured hands to his wife's flawless facade. Something shifted in his expression, the awakening of a truth he'd been too blind to see. The morning light streamed through the Montgomery mansion's floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the tension that hung in the air like a physical presence. William sat in his home office, fingers steepled under his chin as he processed what Martha had just told him. The loyal housekeeper stood nervously by the door, her hands twisting the edge of her apron. "This isn't the first time, Mr. Montgomery," Martha said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The girls are afraid to tell you. They think you'll be disappointed in them." William closed his eyes, the weight of his negligence crushing him. "And Victoria, this treatment of the girls, you've witnessed it." "Not directly. She's careful." Martha hesitated. "But I've seen the aftermath. The tears, the injuries explained away as clumsiness, the punishments that seem excessive for minor infractions." A soft knock interrupted them. Victoria entered, the picture of concerned elegance in a cashmere sweater and pearls. Her smile faltered slightly at the sight of Martha, but she recovered instantly. "Darling, the doctor just left. The girls have mild skin irritation from the cleaning products. He prescribed a cream." She approached William's desk, placing a manicured hand on his shoulder. "I feel terrible. I should have supervised them more closely when they insisted on helping with the chores." William studied his wife's perfect composure, searching for cracks in the facade. "The girls say they were forced to clean 50 pots as punishment." "For what, Victoria?" Victoria's eyes widened in practiced innocence. "Punishment? No, William. You misunderstood them. They were excited about their birthday and couldn't sleep. I suggested a productive activity to channel their energy. You know how children exaggerate." Before William could respond, his phone buzzed with his sister Diane's name flashing on the screen. He declined the call, but the interruption had given Victoria time to compose her next move. "William," she said, perching on the edge of his desk, "I know the transition hasn't been easy, for any of us. I'm trying my best to be a mother to girls who lost theirs in such tragic circumstances." The mention of Elizabeth's passing during childbirth 12 years ago still had the power to knock the wind from William's lungs. He'd been building financial empires across continents while barely able to look his daughters in the eye, Elizabeth's eyes, for more than a few minutes without drowning in guilt. Victoria had seemed like salvation, a chance to give his daughters the maternal guidance they deserved. "The girls need structure, boundaries," Victoria continued, reaching for his hand. "I perhaps overstepped in my methods, but my intentions were pure. I want them to grow into strong, independent women like their mother was." The mention of Elizabeth in Victoria's mouth felt wrong somehow, but William couldn't articulate why. Doubt crept in. Was he overreacting? Had years of emotional absence compromised his ability to judge what was best for his own children? "Mr. Montgomery," Martha interjected quietly, "Miss Lily and Miss Emma are waiting for you in the garden for their birthday breakfast." William nodded, standing abruptly. "We'll continue this discussion later, Victoria." Alone in the office, Victoria's sweet smile transformed into a cold, calculating expression. She opened William's computer with practiced ease. His password had been the twins' birth date, embarrassingly simple to guess. Within minutes, she had accessed his investment portfolio, taking screenshots of account numbers and holdings. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diane Montgomery. "Progress?" Victoria typed swiftly, "Minor setback." The old housekeeper is becoming a problem. Across town in her minimalist penthouse apartment, Diane Montgomery smiled at the response. Her brother's blind spot had always been his insufferable loyalty to those he considered family, including that meddling housekeeper who had been with them since their parents' time. Bringing Victoria into William's life had been Diane's masterpiece, the culmination of years of resentment over their father's decision to leave control of Montgomery Investments solely to William, despite Diane's equal business acumen. Back at Mwai, the estate, William sat with his daughters in the garden gazebo, watching them unwrap the presents he'd brought from London. Their bandaged hands moved carefully over the wrapping paper. "Daddy, Lily," said, her voice serious beyond her years, "there's something you should know about Victoria." William leaned forward, giving his daughter his full attention, something he realized with shame had become a rarity. "She's different when you're not here," Emma continued, exchanging a look with her twin. "And we heard her talking to Aunt Diane on the phone last week." They were laughing about how soon she would be controlling half of everything. A cold feeling settled in William's stomach. "Are you certain about this?" Both girls nodded solemnly. "Mr. Montgomery," Martha approached, carrying a silver tray with breakfast pastries. "Your attorney, Mr. Cooper, called. He says it's urgent regarding the new partnership agreements Victoria asked him to draft last week." William froze. "What partnership agreements?" Martha's expression confirmed his suspicion. She had fabricated the message to test a theory. And William's reaction told her everything she needed to know. That evening, William called his oldest friend and attorney, James Cooper. Their conversation lasted hours, with William pacing the length of his study, occasionally glancing at the family portrait on his desk, taken years ago when Elizabeth was still alive, the twins just infants in her arms. "I need everything you can find on Victoria Sheffield," William said finally. "Every detail, no matter how insignificant. And James, keep this between us." As he hung up, William noticed a shadow pass by his door. Victoria stood in the hallway, her silhouette illuminated by the dim light. For a brief moment, he caught an expression on her face he'd never seen before, cold, calculating, almost predatory. When she noticed his gaze, her features instantly rearranged into the loving smile he'd grown accustomed to. "Coming to bed, darling?" she called sweetly. William forced a smile. "Soon, just finishing some work." As Victoria glided away, William pulled out his personal laptop, not the company one Victoria had accessed earlier, and began his own investigation into the woman he had married. The first search results made his blood run cold. Lily Montgomery couldn't sleep. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight as she slipped out of bed. Careful not to wake Emma. Their shared bedroom, a spacious suite decorated in soft blues and creams, had always been their sanctuary. Now even here they didn't feel safe. She padded silently to the bathroom, wincing as the cream the doctor had prescribed stung her still raw hands. Through the partially open window, voices drifted up from the terrace below. Victoria's and, Lily frowned, Aunt Diane's. "At this hour?" "For taking too long," Diane was saying, her voice carrying in the still night air. "The shareholders' meeting is in 3 weeks. We need those proxy signatures before then." "Patience," Victoria replied, the typical warmth in her voice notably absent. "I've already accessed his primary accounts. The next step is getting him to transfer the trust fund control. And the girls? They're becoming a problem." Lily pressed closer to the window, barely breathing. "The girls are the key," Victoria said. "Once I'm their legal guardian, their trust funds fall under my control too. Nearly 40 million each. And William? Leave William to me. Men like him, suffering from guilt and loneliness, are so predictable. The prenup won't matter once I have evidence he's mentally unfit to run the company." Lily's heart hammered against her ribs. She had to tell Emma, tell Martha, tell her father, but who would believe her? Victoria was always so careful, so perfect when others were watching. She crept back to the bedroom, gently shaking her sister awake. "Em, I heard them. Victoria and Aunt Diane. They're planning something terrible." Emma blinked sleepily, then focused as Lily recounted the conversation. By the time she finished, both girls were wide awake, huddled together on Emma's bed. "Dad won't believe us," Emma whispered. "He thinks we're just having trouble adjusting." "Then we need proof," Lily said firmly. "Remember how Martha taught us to use the voice recorder on our tablets for school presentations? We could record Victoria when she thinks we're not around. The next morning, Martha found the girls unusually quiet at breakfast. Victoria had already left for her charity committee meeting, something Martha had grown suspicious of, as these meetings never seemed to have any tangible outcomes. "Are you feeling all right, dears?" Martha asked, placing fresh orange juice before them. Lily glanced at Emma, who nodded slightly. "Martha, we need to tell you something. About Victoria and Aunt Diane." Martha listened intently as the twins shared what Lily had overheard. Her weathered face grew increasingly troubled. For years she'd harbored concerns about Diane's influence over family matters, but this was far worse than she'd imagined. "We're going to get proof," Emma explained, showing Martha the recording app on her tablet. Martha shook her head. "That's too dangerous. If Victoria suspects anything, then what do we do?" Lily asked, frustration evident in her voice. "Dad never sees how she really is." Martha lowered her voice. "Leave this to me. I've known your father since before you were born. He'll listen, especially now that he's beginning to see through her facade." Across town, William sat in James Cooper's office, staring at the documents spread before him. The attorney's investigation had yielded disturbing preliminary findings. "Victoria Sheffield doesn't exist, at least not before 5 years ago," James explained, pointing to the records. "No birth certificate, no school records, no credit history prior to 2021. It's as if she appeared out of thin air." William ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "That's impossible. She has references, friends. She told me she graduated from Vassar." James slid another folder across the desk. "Vassar has no record of anyone by that name. Her supposed references either don't exist or are connected to shell companies linked to—" He hesitated. "Linked to what, James?" "To companies owned by Blackridge Capital. Richard Blackridge's firm." William felt the blood drain from his face. Richard Blackridge was his most ruthless competitor, a man who had tried to orchestrate a hostile takeover of Montgomery Investments 3 years earlier. "There's more," James continued reluctantly. "I hired a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud. He found evidence suggesting Victoria may have been involved with at least 2 other wealthy businessmen before you. Both divorced, both lost significant assets shortly after meeting her. Different names were used, but facial recognition software confirmed it's the same woman." William stood abruptly, pacing the office. "I need to get her away from my daughters today." "Tread carefully," James warned. "If she realizes you're onto her, there's no telling what she might do. We need irrefutable evidence before making any moves." The Montgomery estate seemed unnaturally quiet when William returned home that afternoon. He found Martha in the kitchen, preparing dinner with unusual intensity. "Where are the girls?" he asked, loosening his tie. "In the library with their tutor," Martha replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Montgomery, I need to speak with you urgently." Before she could continue, Victoria swept into the kitchen, a vision in a cream-colored dress that accentuated her slim figure. "William, you're home early. I was just about to call you. I've arranged a surprise weekend in the Hamptons, just the 2 of us." She kissed his cheek, then noticed his stiff posture. "Is something wrong, darling?" William forced a smile. "Not at all. A weekend away sounds perfect. When were you thinking?" "Tomorrow. I've already asked Martha to pack your things." Victoria glanced at the housekeeper, a subtle warning in her eyes. Later that evening, William found a moment alone with Martha in his study. "What did you need to tell me?" he asked quietly. Martha glanced nervously at the door. "The girls overheard Victoria speaking with your sister last night. They were discussing access to the girls' trust funds and making you appear unfit to run the company." William's jaw tightened. "Did anyone else hear this conversation?" "No, sir. But the girls are planning to record Victoria secretly. I told them it was too dangerous, but they're determined." William felt a surge of pride mixed with fear for his daughters. "Tell them to stop. I'll handle this from now on." As William worked late into the night, formulating a plan with James over encrypted messages, he heard a soft knock at his study door. The twins entered, still in their matching pajamas, looking smaller and more vulnerable than he'd seen them in years. "Daddy," Lily began, her voice steady despite her obvious fear, "we have something to show you." Emma held out her tablet, pressing play on an audio file. Victoria's voice filled the room, cold and calculating, as she spoke to someone on the phone. "Once I have control of the Montgomery assets, you'll get your 20%, as agreed. Just make sure those board members stay in line." William's expression hardened as he pulled his daughters close. For the first time in years, he truly saw them, not as painful reminders of what he'd lost, but as the precious legacy Elizabeth had left him. They were brave, intelligent, and in danger because of his blindness. "Listen carefully," he whispered, looking from one identical face to the other. "This is what we're going to do." Upstairs, Victoria stood in the master bathroom, applying her nightly skincare routine while speaking quietly into her earpiece. "Everything's proceeding as planned. By this time next month, Montgomery Investments will be under new management, and those brats will be shipped off to some Swiss boarding school." The voice on the other end chuckled. "Excellent work, Rebecca, or should I say Victoria. The security system at the Montgomery estate mysteriously malfunctioned on Tuesday night, leaving the mansion vulnerable for precisely 47 minutes. William, alerted by a notification on his phone, immediately called the security company, only to be told that a scheduled system update had been implemented, an update he had never authorized. "It's starting," James Cooper said grimly when William called him from his car driving home from the office early. "They're making their move." William gripped the steering wheel tighter. "The technician is coming tomorrow morning. I've arranged for a full security audit. And Victoria, does she suspect you know?" "I don't think so. I've been playing the distracted workaholic husband. Not much of a stretch, unfortunately." The self-recrimination in William's voice was evident. "The girls and Martha are keeping detailed records of everything. Victoria doesn't realize how observant they are." At the mansion, Victoria presided over dinner with practiced charm. She'd prepared a special meal for the twins, their favorite pasta dish, which struck Martha as odd, given Victoria's previous lack of interest in the girls' preferences. "I thought we could have a girls' night," Victoria announced, smiling at Lily and Emma. "Your father mentioned he'll be working late, so perhaps we could watch a movie together." "Your choice, of course." The twins exchanged glances, their silent communication system working overtime. Since discovering Victoria's true intentions, they had become skilled at hiding their knowledge, pretending to gradually warm to their stepmother while documenting her every suspicious action. "That sounds nice," Emma said carefully, taking a small bite of pasta. "Doesn't it, Lily?" Lily nodded, her expression neutral. "Yes, thank you." Martha, watching from the sidelines, noticed Victoria's eyes tracking the girls' every movement as they ate, an unusual intensity in her gaze. When Emma set down her fork after only a few bites, something like disappointment flickered across Victoria's perfect features. "Not hungry, dear?" Victoria asked, her voice honey-sweet. "Just tired," Emma replied, offering a weak smile. "May I be excused? I have a headache." Victoria's lips tightened almost imperceptibly before smoothing into concern. "Of course. Perhaps an early night would be best for both of you." She turned to Martha. "Would you mind checking on Emma in an hour? Make sure she doesn't need anything for that headache?" After the girls left, Martha began clearing the table, carefully scraping the remainder of Emma's pasta into a container rather than the trash. Years of working for the Montgomery family had honed her instincts, and something about tonight had triggered every internal alarm she possessed. Upstairs, Emma sat on the edge of her bed while Lily paced the room. "She put something in the food," Emma whispered, her face pale. "Did you see how she watched us eat?" Lily nodded, her expression grim. "I didn't swallow any of mine, just moved it around on the plate." A soft knock at their door made both girls jump. Martha entered, holding the container with Emma's leftover pasta. "I think you're right to be cautious," she said quietly. "I'm going to have this analyzed. In the meantime, don't eat or drink anything unless I've prepared it myself." 3 days later, a courier delivered a plain manila envelope to James Cooper's office. Inside was a laboratory report confirming the presence of a mild sedative in the pasta sample. Not enough to cause serious harm, but sufficient to make a child groggy and compliant. William read the report in James's office, his hands shaking with rage. "This ends now. We need to be strategic," James cautioned. "The evidence is mounting, but it's still circumstantial. If we move too soon, Victoria could spin this against you. Remember, she's been systematically accessing your files, recording conversations out of context. She's building a case to make you appear unstable. She drugged my children, James. I know, James said, his voice softening, and we will protect them. But we need to catch her in the act with evidence that cannot be disputed. Meanwhile, an unexpected ally emerged in the form of Eliza Reynolds, a financial journalist who recognized Victoria's face in a Society page photograph from one of the Montgomery charity galas. She reached out to Martha through a circuitous route, having investigated a similar case in Seattle 2 years earlier. She went by the name Catherine Walker then, Eliza explained, showing Martha a file of news clippings and photographs. Married to Timothy Schultz, tech entrepreneur. Within a year, he lost control of his company, suffered a nervous breakdown, and she walked away with over $30 million in the divorce settlement. Martha studied the photographs, the same perfect smile, the same calculating eyes. There are others? Eliza nodded grimly. At least 3 that I've confirmed. Always wealthy, always somewhat isolated men with significant assets, and always a different name, different background story. The information was passed to James, who added it to his growing dossier. The web around Victoria was tightening, but she remained seemingly oblivious, focused on her own plans. On Friday morning, Victoria approached William at breakfast with a stack of papers. Darling, I almost forgot. The foundation needs your signature on these donation documents. The gala committee is meeting in an hour. William glanced at the papers, noting they were indeed labeled Montgomery Family Foundation at the top. Of course, I'll look these over in my study. Once alone, he carefully examined each page, finding exactly what James had predicted. Hidden among the standard philanthropic language was a clause authorizing Victoria as a signatory on several key accounts, as well as transfer of proxy voting rights for a significant portion of Montgomery Investments shares. William photographed the documents, sent them to James, then signed a different set of papers that looked identical, but contained none of the hidden clauses. When he returned them to Victoria, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Is everything all right, William?" she asked, tucking the papers into her designer handbag. "You seem distracted lately." "Just busy," he replied, kissing her cheek. "The Singapore expansion is requiring more attention than anticipated." Victoria tilted her head, studying him. "You work too hard. Perhaps we should revisit that weekend away. The girls would be fine with Martha." "Soon," William promised, already moving toward the door. "I have a breakfast meeting." As William's car pulled away from the estate, Victoria's pleasant expression hardened. She pulled out her phone, dialing Diane's number. "We have a problem. I think he suspects something." Diane's voice came through, sharp with anxiety. "How much does he know?" "I'm not sure. But we need to accelerate the plan. Is Blackridge ready?" "He's been ready for weeks. His lawyers have the psychological evaluation prepared. We just need the evidence of William's erratic behavior to file for emergency conservatorship." Victoria moved to the window, watching as Lily and Emma crossed the lawn toward the pool, Martha following with towels. "I'll have it by Monday." The girls are the weak link. William would do anything if he thought they were at risk. Upstairs, in Victoria and William's bedroom, a small device hidden in an air vent recorded every word of the conversation, transmitting it securely to James Cooper's office. The attorney listened with grim satisfaction, adding the recording to his growing cache of evidence. "Checkmate," he murmured, reaching for his phone to call William. Across town, Emma suddenly doubled over by the pool, clutching her stomach in apparent agony. As Martha rushed to her side, Lily fought to maintain her composure, remembering their father's careful instructions. The trap was set. The Montgomery mansion buzzed with activity as preparations for the evening's charity gala reached their peak. Florists arranged elaborate centerpieces in the grand ballroom, while caterers transformed the kitchen into a hive of culinary artistry. Victoria moved through the chaos with practiced ease, directing staff with the precision of a battlefield general. "The governor will be seated at table 1, and beside William," she instructed the event coordinator. "Make sure the Blackridges are at table 3, visible but not too close." Her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "Everything in place. Blackridge's lawyer standing by." Victoria allowed herself a small smile. Tonight would be the culmination of months of careful planning. William Montgomery's spectacular public meltdown, followed by an emergency petition for conservatorship. By morning, control of Montgomery Investments would effectively belong to Victoria and her allies. The twins' trust funds would be next. Upstairs, Emma lay in bed, playing the role of concerned sister, while Martha hovered nearby with genuine worry etched on her features. The doctor said it's just a stomach bug, Emma assured the housekeeper, her acting skills impressive for a 12-year-old. I'll be fine by tomorrow. Lily sat at her sister's bedside, holding her hand. Are you sure you don't want me to stay home with you tonight? Emma shook her head. No, Dad needs you there. Just stick to the plan. The plan had been meticulously crafted over the past week, a counter-strategy developed by William, James, the twins and Martha to trap Victoria and her co-conspirators in their own web of deception. By 6 o'clock, the mansion's grand foyer filled with Connecticut's elite, politicians, business leaders and socialites in formal attire, sipping champagne and making generous donations to the Montgomery Family Foundation. Victoria glided through the crowd in a stunning red gown, playing the perfect hostess, while William worked the room with uncharacteristic gregariousness. You seem different tonight, Victoria murmured, when they briefly came together near the string quartet. Almost carefree. William smiled enigmatically. Perhaps I've had a revelation about what really matters. Before Victoria could probe further, Richard Blackridge approached, his imposing figure commanding attention in a custom tuxedo. Montgomery, he greeted with artificial warmth. Magnificent event, as always. William's expression remained pleasant, though his eyes hardened slightly. Blackridge, surprised to see you here. I don't recall your name on the guest list. Last-minute invitation from your sister, Blackridge replied smoothly. Diane and I have some mutual interests. I'm sure you do, William said, his voice neutral. As the evening progressed, Victoria grew increasingly anxious. William was supposed to be distracted, emotional. The doctored video she had compiled of his supposed outbursts needed context to be believable. Instead, he was charming and composed, commanding the room with the confidence of a man firmly in control. At precisely 9:30, James Cooper arrived, making his way directly to William. The two men conversed quietly in a corner, occasionally glancing toward Victoria and Blackridge, who had positioned themselves near Diane by the bar. Something's wrong, Victoria hissed to Diane. He's too calm. And why is Cooper here? He wasn't invited. Diane's perfectly manicured nails tapped nervously against her champagne flute. Maybe we should postpone. If William's suspicious. We can't postpone, Victoria snapped. The board meeting is Wednesday. This is our only chance. Suddenly the music stopped. William stepped onto the small stage where the quartet had been playing, tapping a microphone to gain the crowd's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your generosity tonight, he began, his voice strong and clear. The Montgomery Family Foundation has always stood for integrity and transparency, values my late wife Elizabeth cherished and instilled in our daughters. Victoria frowned, moving closer to the stage. This wasn't part of the evening's program. Tonight I'd like to honor those values by addressing a situation that affects not only my family, but potentially many of yours, William continued. For the past several months, my family has been targeted by an elaborate conspiracy to seize control of our assets. A murmur swept through the crowd. Victoria froze, her face paling beneath her perfect makeup. My attorney, James Cooper, has compiled irrefutable evidence of this conspiracy, which involves identity fraud, corporate espionage, and even attempts to harm my children. William's gaze found Victoria in the crowd. This evidence has been submitted to the FBI, the SEC, and the Connecticut State Attorney's Office. Blackridge was already backing toward the exit, but two men in suits, plainclothes officers, blocked his path. Diane grabbed Victoria's arm. We need to leave now. But Victoria remained rooted in place, her mind racing for a counter-strategy. She forced a concerned expression, moving toward the stage. William, darling, you're not well. Let me help you. Play the recordings, William instructed someone off stage. Victoria's own voice filled the ballroom, cold and calculating as she discussed with Diane and Blackridge their plans to declare William mentally unfit, gain control of the company, and send the twins to boarding school. The color drained from her face as her elaborate persona crumbled in real time before the horrified audience. Victoria Sheffield is not her real name, William explained. as security personnel moved strategically through the crowd. She has operated under at least 4 different identities in the past decade, targeting wealthy families across the country. Tonight, that pattern ends. As if on cue, Lily appeared at her father's side, standing tall despite her young age. Emma entered from the side door, no longer pretending to be ill, joining her sister and father on stage in a powerful tableau of family unity. Martha Wilson, our housekeeper and the true guardian angel of our family, worked with my daughters to uncover the truth, William acknowledged, gesturing to where Martha stood quietly near the stage. Their courage and loyalty revealed what my own blindness had hidden. Victoria lunged toward the nearest exit, but was intercepted by a female officer. Diane, seeing the game was lost, simply sank into a chair, her aristocratic composure finally shattered. Officers will be taking statements from Ms. Sheffield and her accomplices, William announced. The rest of you, please enjoy the remainder of the evening. The Montgomery family, the real one, is grateful for your support. As the crowd erupted in stunned conversation, William led his daughters from the stage. The 3 of them, along with Martha and James, retreated to the quiet of William's study. "Is it really over?" Emma asked, her voice small in the book-lined room. William gathered both girls into his arms, truly seeing them for the first time in years, not as painful reminders of what he had lost, but as Elizabeth's greatest gift to him, resilient, intelligent, and brave beyond their years. "It's over," he assured them. "And something new is beginning." Martha wiped a tear from her weathered cheek. "Your mother would be so proud of you both," she told the twins. "So very proud." William looked up at the portrait of Elizabeth that hung above the fireplace. Her eyes, so like the twins, seemed to glow with approval in the soft lamplight. "I've been absent for too long," he acknowledged, his voice thick with emotion. "Building an empire while neglecting what truly matters. That changes today." 3 months later, the Montgomery mansion hummed with a different kind of energy. The formal furniture had been replaced with more comfortable pieces. Family photographs adorned previously sterile walls, and laughter, absent for so long, echoed through the hallways. William, seated at the kitchen table, helping the twins with their science project, looked up as Martha placed a plate of cookies before them. The investigation into Victoria, whose real name turned out to be Rebecca Larson, had revealed a network of fraud that spanned multiple states. Diane had accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony against Blackridge and Rebecca, whose previous victims were finally receiving justice. But more importantly, the Montgomery family had healed. William had stepped back from day-to-day operations at the company, prioritizing time with his daughters. The twins were flourishing, their bond with their father growing stronger each day. "Dad," Lily said, looking up from her project, "we were thinking about the foundation. What if we created a program to help families affected by fraud? People like us." William smiled, recognizing Elizabeth's compassion in his daughter's suggestion. "That's a wonderful idea. We could call it the Elizabeth Montgomery Truth Project." As the twins enthusiastically began planning this new venture, William caught Martha's eye across the kitchen. The loyal housekeeper who had protected his family when he could not nodded in quiet understanding. The Montgomery mansion, once a showcase of wealth but empty of true connection, had finally become what it was always meant to be, a home where truth and love prevailed over deception and greed. The greatest fortune, William had learned, was not in his financial empire, but in the trust and love of the family that had been there all along, waiting for him to see what truly mattered.